Forests, a place for calmness and serenity, for listening to the quiet rustling of leaves on the trees as one wanders on the soft grass beneath. Well, that was definitely not happening right now, as Ruby sprinted full speed through the previously quiet forest, calmly avoiding the rather large Grim that tracked her as she led it towards the ambush. At said ambush location, Ren, Nora, Jean, and Rosaline crouched behind a fallen log, waiting for Ruby to bring their target, or more accurately, discussing the name of their new team. "I'm telling you, Junior is a much better name," Nora complained as they walked, waving her arms around, exasperated. She wore a new outfit that was much the same as her old gear, except for a few slight differences, mainly having the new black jacket and a longer skirt. "But we're helping Ruby with her objective. Wouldn't that mean she's the leader? Hence, Ranger," Ren countered. His normal outfit changed to have a sleeveless shirt, two pink bicep-high gloves over his forearms, as well as having extended the tails of his tailcoat. "Guys, we need to focus," Jean scolded, as he crouched behind the tree trunk. Rosaline crouched next to him as she ruffled through her backpack. "Plus, Junior is way cooler." "See?" Nora cheered. Ren decided it would be another hour-long argument if he tried to counter. "Come on, guys, why do you always forget about me?" Rosaline pouted as she took out her two smart pistols and loaded in lightning dust rounds, cocking the chambers and putting them onto her magnet-locked plate on the side of her parkour kit. She had changed up her outfit a bit since the fall of Beacon, having a few modifications made. Her knee-high brass combat boots were the same, although she now wore black pants under them, rather than her combat skirt. She also wore a regal purple peacoat with two tails, much like Ren's outfit, going down just above her knees, a large collar comforting the back of her neck with the same velvet lining on the inside. She still had her white pauldron on her right shoulder, though now the symbol was of a dark red rose with flames embellished in black around it. Her gauntlet stayed the same, bone white, but she had attached some of Demon's old enhancements, having the grapple hook and gravity star catapult installed. The biggest change, though, had to be the mask she had made before she left Mistral, a homage to Demon to remember his sacrifice. It was a bone-white half-mask that covered her mouth and nose as well as one eye. Its design was much the same as his, in that where her eyes had been covered with red glass that displayed a HUD over her landscape without ruining her normal vision. She didn't like the idea of altering her voice. She had instead opted to have slits cut vertically into the mask, much like a knight's helmet. She let her hair down and dyed a single set of locks a blood red, like Ren with his magenta streak. A parkour kit was strapped behind the small of her back, and she had installed maglock plates for her two pistols. "We didn't forget about you," Nora nearly yelled, covering her heart with her hand in mock offense. "It's just that there are only 4 people in a team, and we have 5, so it kinda doesn't work." Rosaline huffed and was about to respond, but not before a titanic rumbling shook the ground, moving the stones and pebbles. "It's here," was the only thing John said, before they all looked up to see Ruby practically flying through the air as she fired crescent rows behind her, her new outfit on display as her cloak fluttered in the wind. What they saw next made them pale. They hadn't expected it to be that big. A titanic rock golem lumbered out of the trees and took a swing at Ruby, missing when she didn't see the edge of the cliff and fell into the trees below, right where the rest of the team were. It took a massive swing with its club of an arm again and cleared a sizable amount of forest and cutting out something that resembled an arena. "We have to get it off her," John commanded, running off to distract it while Nora and Ren jumped into one of the higher-up trees to get a better vantage point. Just as Rosaline was about to join them, she heard a collection of howls from behind them, turning to see a group of Beowulfs hunched over and sprinting full speed at her, a large group of Grim behind them as well, just to add to the danger. "Ruby!" Rosaline shouted, taking out her dual pistols and activating the targeting, watching as they began locking onto the masks of the wolves near the front. "What's up?" asked the girl as she dashed to stand next to Rosaline, firing crescent rows as she did so. I'm going to take care of the party crashers. Do you think you can take care of that thing without me? We'll be fine. Just don't do anything dumb, Ruby warned, dashing back into the thick of the action and leaving Rosaline to take on the horde. She smiled a tiny bit as she pulled the trigger, watching as she pulled the trigger, and 9 wolves dropped dead at the moment later as 3 bullet holes appeared in tight circle in each of their heads. With practiced ease, she pulled the release switch, dropping the spent magazines on the floor, and slid 2 new ones in simultaneously. Having multiple clips attached to her parkour kit so that all she had to do is angle them just right and whip them behind her back so that the clips locked in. Then she'd be back in action a moment later. It was far better than the one-at-a-time loading she'd been having to resort to whenever her 18-round mags were spent. Flipping the counterweight switch after the mags were in place, the handles shifted into a parallel with the barrel and chrome blades flipped out, forming 2 6-inch daggers. Rosaline pouring aura through them as she activated the dust, coating them in fire and ice. She had taken to calling them Ember Snow after Nora and Ruby constantly annoyed her about not having named her weapons. So she took probably the most obvious name, and despite being out of practical necessity to stop the two from talking her ear off, she had taken a liking to it. Ember has her fire dagger, and Snow has her ice. With a thought, her 2 spectral wings shimmered into existence behind her, and she felt invisible tendrils working their way into her shoulder blades as the nerves of the wings connected to her body. She had gained much better control over them than what she had originally, as well as finding out that they were good for a lot more things than just flying. As the next wave of Beowulfs approached, she brought her wings in front of her like a shield, beginning to run forward with them. The first 2 attacked, their claws ready to tear great gouges into her wings, but they only slid off the wings like it was steel. Their brief moment of shock was quickly righted as the 2 wings flicked out and sent them both flying into the trees a few feet away with a sickening crack to follow. Rosaline brought Ember Snow to bear and used the dagger to skewer a Beowulf that was trying to hit her from behind. She quickly ripped around and jumped back to avoid another slash, reprimanding the offender by slashing midair with Ember, causing a wave of fire to burn its hide and make it howl in pain. She jumped forward and slashed its throat, ending the cries. She flicked the switch on Snow back to her pistol form and locked onto the rest of the Beowulfs that were in her area. One made to try and stop her, but her left wing came up just in time and blocked the swipe. Rosaline using her parkour kit to jump back into the air while firing her pistols. 5 more dropped to the ground with bullets lodged in their skulls, leaving Rosaline alone in the forest with no more Grim around, until 2 Ursai decided to join in. From right behind her, she heard lumbering footsteps, and used her wings to propel herself into the air, escaping a massive claw by an inch, and turning around to see what had tried to kill her. When she saw the 2 Grim, she wasn't all too happy. She knew she had it better than Ranger? Junior? Using the last of the clip in Snow, she hit the head in one Ursai enough for it to stumble back a bit and give her room to fight the other one. It roared forward and jumped a bit into the air to try and hit her down, falling short by a foot or so. Her wings beat back and she held out Ember, driving it into the Ursa's skull and tearing it out, causing black blood to spew out. She landed on the ground with a thud behind the massive bear, then quickly flicked the selector on Snow back into a knife, driving them both into its back and snapping them one after the other repeatedly. The Grim roared in pain once again and tried to shove her off, failing miserably as she used her wings to practically hug the creature, while her arms could continue their attacks. Just as she was sure it was near death, she started to get a very weird feeling, her eyes going wide as she jumped off the Ursa to try and avoid the other as it took a slash at her. She had to twist her body in an almost inhuman angle, but managed to avoid the swipe, using her wings to propel herself away from the 2 Grim. She landed about 10 feet above and spun around, flipping the selector switches on both her weapons, locking onto the head of the wounded Ursa and pulling the trigger, unloading all 36 rounds into its skull. It dropped back to the ground in a strangled moan, and the others roared in rage, running forward, intent on separating her from her shoulders. She couldn't use the same tactic she had with the last Ursa on this one, that had spikes covering its back as well. Something she definitely didn't want to go near. She reloaded her pistol and took off the auto-aim, something Demon had failed to actually show her, and she had to figure out herself. She then readied her own combat stance, the wing covering her left arm like a shield while her pistols rested on top. As the Ursa entered her range, she dove to the side and fired 2 quick shots aimed for its eyes, one managing to pierce through the iris and make it flinch from the attack. She took her advantage of the pause and put the pistol right up to its eye, letting 4 more shots before she was hit back by the swing of the Ursai's claw. She flew back a few feet and used her parkour kit automatically kept her from spinning, letting her land on her feet and skid for a second. The Ursai roared again and charged, Rosaline staying calm and aiming her pistol again for its already damaged face. Every few steps it took, she fired a shot so that it was distracted for just a second. She didn't exactly need it to get damaged. While it was still a few feet away, she lifted up her right arm to aim the grappling hook attached to the front, firing it into the Ursai's kneecap with a blade grapple, firing the other end into the ground with an anchor point. She then pulled the line taut. It slammed face first into the ground. Rosaline jumped forward and fired even more shots into its eyes. It roared and swept out with its free claw, having it easily dodged by the human it was trying to hit. She took out a grenade that was hooked onto her belt and pulled the pin, dashing forward and shoving it into the Ursai's open maw before it could even retaliate. Her wings countered its last-ditch attempt to kill her. Then she leapt back to watch her handiwork. It roared for a moment before a dull thud escaped from inside its belly, and a tiny bit of black smoke started coming from its mouth. It stood still for a couple seconds, as if coming to terms with the fact that it was meant to be dead. Then it slumped over onto the ground, Rosaline seeing a large hole in its back where the explosion had escaped. She let out a breath and felt her adrenaline die down, just as she heard a single shot echo from the forest. Rosaline immediately knowing it was RWBY thanks to Crescent Rose's distinctive discharge. She reloaded her pistols for what she hoped was the last time, and mag-locked them, preparing to fly over to the rest of her team with the help of her wings. Just as she jumped and flew a couple of meters, she failed to notice the black blur jump at her from the side. The thing slammed into her and sent her sprawling to the ground, rolling her for a couple of times before she came to a stop, getting back up to see what had just happened. She looked to see an alpha Beowulf growling at her through bared teeth, pawing the ground angrily, roughly 20 feet from where she stood. It was completely alone, and she took consolation from that, deciding she'd test out one of the newer things she learned about her semblance while they were saving a town on the way from Grimm. She took a deep breath and focused all the energy she could into her palms, feeling the nerves in her wings disappear and a strange tingling sensation moving from her body into her hands. Her mind shifted as she began imagining just what she wanted, opening her eyes a second later to see how she went. In her left hand sat the handle of a longbow, a spectral apparition of a weapon that lightly pulsed with energy, the bow being the same strange ethereal purple material that her wings were composed of, while the arrow for the weapon was held between her finger and her right hand. She took in another breath and brought up the bow, notching the arrow and drawing it back on a near invisible bowstring so that her hand was touching her cheek. Rosaline had just about the same amount of training with a bow that she did with guns on her first day in Remnant. Next to nil. But all she needed was good aim, and after training with different types of weapons after Jimin's suggestion, she had grown rather adept at finding exactly where her shot would land. She aimed the tip of the arrow where she judged it would hit the thing's head. Then she let go. The arrow was released at lightning speed, slammed into the chest of the Alpha. Not exactly where she wanted to aim, but close enough. Then its work began. As it hit, the point dissolved and spread across the Grimm's body, causing it to roar in pain from the energy, its skin dissolving from the arrow. In less than 5 seconds, it was coated completely in glowing purple energy, until it was frozen solid where it stood. A small whimper escaped its throat as it began peeling away into the wind, like one would expect when they died normally, except the flakes were pure purple energy. It continued across its body until there was none left, and even then, the flakes dissolved into the wind, and Rosaline was left alone. She smiled at the success and pumped her fists into the air, dissolving the bow in her hand and reforming it into her angelic wings, flying over to where she had last heard the gunshot. When she arrived, she saw Ren, Nora, John, and Ruby were all sitting around a log while they checked over their weapons. Rosaline seeing a rather large collection of boulders and a tree scattered around the clearing. "I take it you had fun?" she asked sarcastically, seeing all of them jump out of their skin when they saw her floating up in the sky. "Yeah, Team Ranger kicked its butt." Ruby perked up, fist-pumping Rosaline as she walked over. "Team Junior," Nora almost shouted, throwing her hands exasperatedly into the air, walking back in the direction of the village they had come from. The other four sighing and followed her, intent on continuing their journey to Haven Academy. 2 days later, Team Ranger and Rosaline were all laying around the campfire, all of them being exhausted from a day's walking, and even more so for the fact they had only just come out of the remnants of Xi'an, the town they thought they could go through next. Only after burying the remains of a late huntsman that they had traveled late into the night to find a safer spot to rest, setting up a campfire and going to bed for the night, letting Sid in the Atlas Titan stand on guard over the sleeping students, or was so for 3 of the group. 2 of them had decided to wander off and do their own thing for the night. Jean and Rosaline both lost those that they cared about during the assault on Beacon, and it was only after conversing a bit over the last few weeks that they learned their 2 respective other halves had left them departing messages. Unlike the one Pyrrha had left, Demons had been a bit more unprepared, to say the least. As she stood on the forest on the opposite side of the camp where she knew John was training, she had popped her scroll open with the help of a few sticks, with Demon's normal mask filling the screen as the recording played. "Well, looks like I've got myself into another situation," he began, a loud sigh escaping his helmet before he took it off and picked up whatever he was using to film it, turning the camera to show that he was inside the cabin of a massive airship, showing the massive spire of Beacon Tower in the viewport. "I'm driving a stolen Atlas warship straight at a giant-ass dragongram in hopes of killing it, so we actually have a chance of winning this. I know what you're going to say when you see this. You have people that care about you. But that's exactly why I'm doing this. I'd give my life for my friends in the blink of an eye." A sigh was heard from off-camera, and he flicked around, a small smile on his face as he focused in on it. "You know, I've never said this before, but I love you, Rosaline. To tell you the truth, I thought you were just an IMC spy when you started wanting to go places with me, so I just rolled along with it. But it wasn't until the dance that I actually started to see you as something else. When I told you about my problems, you didn't run away and look at me like a psychopath. You actually tried to help. I'm not sure if you truly don't think of me as a monster, but I still do." Rosaline's posture slackened, as it always did when she heard that. She just couldn't understand why he was so down on himself. "You're not a monster, you idiot. I don't care what you did. Just that you knew you were doing something wrong, and that you had a reason behind it." A small tear escaped her eye as she continued to listen, refusing to look in the same video she had cried to not even a week ago. "The things you've said and done are truly something to be marveled at, and those coffee shop runs were some of the best moments of my life. It just kills me to know that I couldn't do anything for you like you did for me. I'm a terrible person. I kill people for a living, and I've led more people to their graves than a small city. You're always too much of an angel to deserve someone like me." The demon on the screen let out a small smile and took out his wingman pistol, cocking the chamber and holding it at his side. "For a while I thought the guns were the only thing I could trust, They never lie, and they never tell half-truths. If you treat them right, they'll give you the best for you, and you can only blame yourself for your failures. But you were the one who showed me that people can be just like that. Something you can truly trust your life with. He put his helmet back on as Rosalind saw tears begin to well in his eyes. Know this before you think of following the path that I took. One where no missteps are allowed. A path that only ends when your legs fail to support you and your heart stops beating. A path where sadness is coupled with pain and victory is the crimson taint of blood. This narrow path goes only one way. A way covered with enemies and brother. A path that will take you without shame into the cold embrace of death. Fight for what is right, for your ancestors, for those you care about, no matter the cause. I always know that there's no going back. Please, I ask that you stay the same Rosalind that I knew, that you keep the same values, and that you don't blame yourself when I die. He turned the camera around again and set it up on the dash of his station, letting it point out to where Rosalind could see the grim dragon flying around Osmond's tower, seeming oblivious to the massive warship. She also saw 100 or so sirens and alarms filling the cabin, all showing just how little chance demons stood of surviving. Well, it's showtime, so I better cut the feed and make sure you get this thing, said Demon off camera, a finger blocking the camera for a second as he hit the transmit button, although the camera didn't cut quite yet. Let's see, he muttered before a robotic voice came over the comm system. Core efficiency boosted to 200%. Reactor overload imminent. Flight speed exceeding recommended limit. Engine pressure building. Failure in 40 seconds. The ship shuddered a bit, and the scroll nearly fell, only to be righted by Demon again. Well, Rosaline, I wish you luck in your later life, and that you find peace and solace in whatever you can. Leave me behind, and find another you can share your life with. Search for a way back home, and live your life to the fullest. I transferred secondary command of Sid and the Titans to you, as well as full authorization status for anything left back in my pod. No matter what, any morning, remember to get up, dress up, show up, and never give up. That's how you know you've got a life to live. His speech was interrupted by a massive explosion as the Grim Dragon crashed through the top of Beacon Tower and began flying straight at the warship. Au revoir, mon amour, was the last words he said before the warship crashed into the dragon and the screen went static. The last she'd ever see of Demon being swallowed up by the destruction he had brought on himself. It went on for a few seconds until the image was replaced by a training video. He was back in his militia outfit in what looked like a firing range, a carbine held in his grip while his helmet was still shrouded his face. Looks like you managed to gain my trust, so I congratulate you on that. Although it means one more thing. You mean something to me. Certainly on a harder task than the former. More than likely you're watching this while I'm 10 feet under, so I'll keep it short. Step 1. Set up your firing position. No matter what you're using, there is a specified stance for each. None of them are the same. Once you've got that down, find a target that is comfortably within your range, maybe at 30 meters or so. Pick another one at the limit of your weapon's range, about 100 meters if you're using a rifle. And don't be cheap and pick up a smart pistol. If I told you to use one of those suckers, it's either because you don't need the lock-on and can free fire that bastard like a god, or I don't want you getting hurt during firefights. Rosalind smiled and took out Ember Snow, keeping the tracking off and lining up 2 targets, one being a rock about 20 meters away, and the other a tree around 40. She took a deep breath and waited for the next part. Now, once you've got your stance, aim at the first target and then the second in succession. And again, continue to go back and forth, locking your sight into position for a moment or two until you know you'll hit it. She aimed both at the rock, lining up the reticules on both at the same point, then switching to the tree, doing the same. Then she went back to the first. Now, close your eyes and shoot the first target. If you miss, then it's your fault for not doing the first part properly. Rosaline flicked the safety off and closed her eyes. Not that it would do much, being all night and all, then fired. She had attached silencers, of course, so that the group couldn't hear the shots and wouldn't be startled, although she did hear a small ping of the bullets as they made impact on the rock. Without opening your eyes, hit the next target. Only after you fire once can you open them. I don't want you cheating on me and opening to full auto. Rosaline quickly switched back to where she thought the tree would be, hoping she would hit it. Then she pulled the trigger. She hesitantly opened her eyes and used the NV enhancement in her new mask to see the holes only about a ruler's length apart on the tree. She smiled and did it again, the shots on the tree being about an inch closer this time. Now, this method can really only take you so far, but it can help you in a lot of ways. For one, judging bullet trajectory greatly increases hip fire shots that are more accurate. Then again, you're only standing still at the moment, so next to you, I want you to find those two spots, then run parallel for as long as you can with the room you have until you lose sight, counting how long it takes. Then continue the other way. Once you've done that a couple times, run from left to right blindfolded and hit the closer target. Then on the way back, you need to hit the furthest target twice. If you miss, then just keep trying until you hit it every time. After a quick reload and pausing the video, she moved over until she was to the far right of the target, just barely able to see them. Just as she pulled her guns to begin, she accidentally activated the tracking systems, which began locking onto something. When she looked to see what they were locking onto, as soon as her head reached where they were, the tracking broke and they were gone. "Ruby, I know you're there," she called out, knowing that only the Red Reaper would be fast enough to completely break the tracking with all the new chips installed. A moment later, she felt a tiny gust of wind to her right and saw the girl pouting next to her, kicking the dirt nervously. "So, what you doing?" Ruby asked innocently. Rosaline sighing at that and deactivating Ember Snow, maglocking them and walking over to her scroll. Demon's video still paused on screen. "Ruby, I knew you were there long enough to figure out what I was doing," replied Rosaline, turning out her scroll's power and putting it away, sitting down on the fallen log and patting next to her. Ruby smiling slightly and sitting next to her. "I miss him too. I just wish he wouldn't have gone off and did all that stupid stuff that got him into trouble," the younger girl said meekly, almost mumbling as she did, although Rosaline still heard her. "That was his strong suit." Ruby giggled a little bit and took out a cookie, splitting it in two and giving one to her, both biting down on the delicious baked treat. "Why did you like him?" asked Ruby offhandedly. "I mean, he was a pretty good brother and all, but I just don't get why you were interested in him." Rosaline ate the last of her cookie before she continued, sighing and bringing up an app on her scroll, bringing up a picture gallery and swiping until she found what she wanted. She held it up to Ruby, and she saw a picture of Demon as she first saw him on his beginning day in Remnant, although it wasn't exactly the way she'd expected. It was a propaganda poster made by the IMC, which showed him with a spike going through his chest and several bullet wounds. The words, "Free the Frontier from its tyranny today," written across the bottom, as well as "Join the IMC at your nearest recruitment station." This is the first time I'd ever heard of him. He was quite literally portrayed as what his namesake was shown him as, a being of hell that was terrorizing the frontier with every breath. I joined the IMC thinking I was just an organization that was having trouble with terrorists. It wasn't until I was put on communications duty until I realized just how terrible we were. I read through emails against orders because I just couldn't sit there all day and monitor for enemy communications when we were literally hundreds of light years away. That's when I first started to see the battle reports. The first few seemed alright. They were just labeled casualties between IMC and the militia, as they should be. Both sides losing a few, and the militia killing a few colonists who got in the crossfire. It wasn't until I read the files that reported entire worlds being lost with no militia presence that I started to get worried. By now, Ruby was sitting quietly as she could, enraptured by the story, while nibbling slightly at the sides of her cookie that she magically pulled from nowhere. I didn't get a chance to do anything, though, as my commander was a complete ass. He tried to force me to clean his entire quarters, and when I said no, he just set my first mission to staff a single-person refueling station on the outer reaches of the frontier. It was lonely as hell for the first 2 months, as I only got a slight relief when I got a break every week to go to the closest colony world. But other than that, I was literally the only person on the entire planet. Ruby almost dropped her cookie when she heard that, but she managed to hold on to it and only let out a slight eep as she shuddered from the thought. It wasn't until an entire fleet of militia ships found the base that I had any real action. I could only sit in the command terminal as the automated defenses took care of them, although it wasn't until Demon landed that I really began to worry. I had hoped that the EMP pulse that the station had sent out would stop them sending any troops to the ground, but apparently they hadn't, and he managed to get inside before I could even comprehend what was happening. He broke through all the robots I had guarding, so I hid in one of the back closets closest to the door with a pistol, hoping he wouldn't find me. He blew apart the bottom floor and was just about to hack into our defenses, but was stopped when some guy spoke through his helmet. He had his volume on pretty loud so I could vaguely hear what he was saying, although I only really began listening when I heard they were going to bombard the station. I broke cover and was about to shoot him until I remembered what I saw in the files. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and a minute later we were in the hangar ready to leave in my dropship. Then after that, we ended up here with no idea what was going on. Kira was the first to wake. Then she woke me up and we began to talk. Even though we were from opposing factions, we ended up talking about a lot of things, and I truly learned what the IMC was doing on the frontier. After we woke him up, without even knowing me at all, he gave me his custom weapon so that I could fight against a couple of Beowulfs because, as you would probably know, I'm pretty terrible with a gun back then. After that, he even told his Titan that I was friendly and gave me a new gun the second he could. When he came to Beacon, I only had to ask once before he taught me how to shoot properly and gave me a smart pistol. I was completely dumbfounded as to why he was acting so nice, and it wasn't until I asked Kira that I began to understand. As far as she knew, he cared for everyone under his command, and took IMC prisoners when he could, which she admitted wasn't that many times. So he's being nice because he was your leader? As far as I could tell, yes. Although, I really thought he was a great guy. When I was talking with Kira later on, when he was unconscious after the initiation, he began telling me about her life in the militia. She told me about how he was basically a living legend for the militia, and whenever he was put on a mission, it went almost without a hitch. When he had been placed at the head of his own legion, everyone was basically praying for whatever god they believed in to be put in it, until they found out he was selecting his troops personally. He spent about a week on various missions until he found everyone he wanted, and then sent the request that they join. And Kira was luckily one of them. She told of how he wouldn't just be some douche commander and order them around like it was the only thing he knew how, but he would ask literally everyone on the ship about the plan of action, even the lowest ranking people among them. I really thought that he was someone I could get to like. And then he woke up, and I got the chance to know him better. He honestly cared about protecting the people around him, even if it meant giving his life. He didn't think he was better than everyone else, just that he had the skill to protect them against those who couldn't fight themselves. He was just slightly annoying, and he always had time to listen for whatever I had to say. I guess I really started to realize I liked him when I saw him after he woke up from his coma, and after that, I just started to see more of a better person that he could be, and how he truly was on the inside, past everything he thought he was. Ruby smiled and shuffled closer to the scroll and flicked across the screen, having an inching feeling about something until she eventually found what she was looking for. Pictures of Rosalie and Demon sitting side by side and smiling into the camera. She saw the older girl show a small smile. She continued scrolling until she found one that truly stuck. It was a picture of Demon without his mask on, a shit-eating grin on his face while he was in his suit from the dance, his hood down so that there was no shadows. Rosaline being next to him with a massive blush on her face and a white rose sticking out of her hair. He decided to take me out to dinner one night, and he gave me that flower. I didn't really know what to say, so he insisted on taking a photo that I could remember how I felt later. How did you feel? Like he was the only person I wanted to be with. Ruby smiled fully and turned her scroll off, taking her into a hug as she saw tears began to fall from the eyes of the older girl. We all miss him, she consoled, rubbing her back to help her through her tears. They sat like that for a few more minutes, the quiet sobbing coming from Rosaline being the only thing filling the clearing as she cleared the pain out of her system. When she was finished, Rosaline tapped Ruby on her head, and she let go, both of them sharing a knowing smile before picking up their stuff and walking back to the camp. As they both went, they felt a weird presence in the clearing with them. As she turned around, she saw a dark figure in the shadows of the forest, casting an even stranger shadow onto the dimly lit ground. While they couldn't see the figure, they saw that the shadow they cast made them look a lot bigger than what they were. And it even looked like the thing had wings and horns, a bone-white mask showing where their head would be, but only 2 blood-red eyes showing through the darkness. Before they could say anything, it turned away and began walking away, along with Dachi crossing their back and the pale moonlight reflecting off armor that they wore. They moved silently and disappeared completely into the shadows, molding into them like they were a second skin until they were completely dissolved into nothingness. Did, Rosaline stuttered, just see him? Ruby finished, as dumbfounded as her. Ruby? Yeah? What the hell did you put in those cookies? Continent of Solitus, Schnee Dust Company headquarters. Demon shook his head to clear his mind, strangely having an image of Ruby and Rosaline in a forest randomly coming to his thoughts. Neo tapped his shoulder as if to ask if anything was wrong, which he shook his head to say no. She nodded, not quite believing him, but left it anyway. They had a job to do. As they both turned back to their task, they saw the massive job that they had just embarked on. Crouching on top of one of the guard towers to the SDC headquarters, they were both about to begin the task they had come here for, breaking the princess out of the tower. And it wasn't exactly going to be simple with the world's biggest dragon protecting her. Wait, Demon muttered, focusing in on one part of the complex. Just how many paladins do they have here? Neo held out her hand and began counting on her fingers, and then she ran out, beginning again. Then after 5 more runs over her fingers, she finally stopped. Well, this is going to be fun, sarcastically muttered Demon as he jumped down. It was time to get Weiss out.